What would you do if your ex-husband's new wife showed up at your doorstep demanding your father's estate, and you were left holding the pieces of a broken family and a shattered legacy? Eleanor thought she was done with the past until her ex-husband's new wife, Serafina, showed up with demands that turned her world upside down. As Eleanor tries to protect her father's estate, a shocking revelation about her brother's involvement leaves her questioning everything. But her father had one final surprise hidden for her, one that would change everything. Will Eleanor be able to uncover the truth and protect her future? Or will the past continue to haunt her? Stay tuned for the next part, and don't forget to subscribe to keep up with the twists and turns. My husband's new wife stood at my doorstep, a greedy smirk playing on her lips. "We're here to claim our rightful share of your father's estate. Pack up and move out immediately." I smiled, watching my lawyer step in behind her. The morning dew still clung to the roses when I heard the sharp click of expensive heels crunching down my garden path. I didn't need to look up to know who it was. Only one person would dare to wear Louboutins while trampling through my father's prized garden. "Eleanor?" Her voice oozed with fake sweetness. "Still playing in the dirt, I see." I didn't respond, focusing on trimming my father's white roses, the same ones he'd planted for my wedding day. The wedding that had ended in divorce papers, and now my ex-husband was running off with the woman standing behind me. "Hello, Serafina," I said quietly. "You know why I'm here." She moved closer, her shadow falling across the flower bed. "The reading of the will is tomorrow, and Julian and I think it's best we discuss things civilly." I finally turned to face her, wiping my soil-covered hands on my gardening apron. "There's nothing to discuss. This is my father's house. His estate was—" "Serafina," she interrupted, her lips curling into a condescending smirk. "And since Julian was like a son to Arthur for 15 years, we believe we're entitled to a fair share." The pruning shears in my hand suddenly felt heavier. The same Julian who cheated on his daughter with his secretary? That Julian? Ancient history, Serafina dismissed with a wave of her perfectly manicured hand. Arthur forgave him. They played golf every Sunday until— She paused for dramatic effect. The wound from my father's death was still raw, not even close to healing. He had only been gone for a few weeks, and here this woman stood this vulture circling, thinking she could claim easy prey. "My father wouldn't have left Julian anything," I said firmly, standing to my full height. "He was many things, but he wasn't foolish." Serafina's fake smile faltered, just for a moment. "We'll see about that. Your brother Declan seems to think differently." At the mention of my brother's name, a cold shiver ran down my spine. We hadn't spoken since Dad's funeral, where Declan had spent more time comforting Julian than his own sister. "You've spoken to Declan?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. "Oh, honey," Serafina leaned in, dropping her voice to a conspiratorial murmur. "We've done more than talk. He's been very helpful." I tightened my grip on the pruning shears, remembering my father's words from years ago. "The roses need a firm hand, Maddie, but never a cruel one. Even the sharpest thorns serve a purpose." "Get off my property, Serafina," I said quietly, "before I forget my manners." She laughed, a sound like glass shattering. "Your property? How quaint! This house is worth $1 million, Eleanor. Did you really think you'd get to keep it all to yourself, playing house in your daddy's mansion while the rest of us get nothing?" "My father built this house brick by brick," I said, my voice unwavering despite the fury rising inside me. "He planted every tree, designed every room. This isn't about money, it's about legacy." "Legacy?" Serafina scoffed. "Wake up, Eleanor. Everything is about money. And tomorrow, when that will is read, you're going to learn that the hard way." She turned to leave, but paused at the garden gate. "Oh, and you might want to start packing. Julian and I will need at least a month to renovate before we move in." As her heels clicked down the path, I looked down at the roses, their white petals now spotted with soil where my trembling hands had crushed them. Dad had always said white roses represented new beginnings, but all I could see was red. I pulled out my phone and dialed the one person I knew would understand. "Imani, it's me. Serafina just paid me a visit." "Yeah, she's exactly as bad as we thought. Can you come over? There's something about the will I need to discuss with you." My best friend's voice was firm and reassuring. I'll be there in minutes. Don't worry, Eleanor. Your father was smarter than they know. As I ended the call, I noticed a small envelope poking out from beneath one of the rose bushes, its corner damp with dew. The handwriting on it was unmistakably my father's, and it was addressed to me. I picked it up with shaking hands, wondering how long it had been waiting there, hidden among the thorns. Well, Dad, I whispered, turning the envelope over in my hands, looks like you left me one last surprise. The sound of Seraphina's car engine faded into the distance as I stood in the garden, holding what felt like the first piece of a puzzle my father had left behind. Whatever game Seraphina and Julian were playing, I had a feeling they were about to learn they'd chosen the wrong opponent. Imani arrived exactly when she promised, her legal briefcase in one hand and a bottle of wine in the other. I figured we might need this, she said, holding up the wine as she walked into Dad's study. I was still holding the unopened envelope, perched on the edge of my father's leather chair. The room smelled of his pipe tobacco and old books, a scent I wasn't ready to lose to Seraphina's promised renovations. You haven't opened it yet? Imani nodded at the envelope, settling her briefcase down with a heavy thunk. I wanted to wait for you, after what Seraphina said about Declan helping them. Open it, Imani insisted, pouring 2 generous glasses of wine. Your father was very specific about certain things being revealed at certain times. My head snapped up. What do you mean? She handed me a glass. Open the letter, Eleanor. With trembling fingers, I broke the seal. Inside was a single sheet of paper and a small key. Dear Maddie, I read aloud, my father's voice echoing in my head. If you're reading this, then someone has already made a move on the estate. Knowing human nature as I do, I'm guessing it's Seraphina. She always did remind me of a shark all teeth and no soul. Imani snorted into her wine glass. The key enclosed opens the bottom drawer of my desk. Inside, you'll find everything you need to protect what's yours. Remember what I taught you about chess? Sometimes you have to sacrifice a pawn to protect the queen. Love, Dad. I looked up at Imani, who was already moving toward the desk. You knew about this? I helped him set it up, she admitted, gesturing for me to use the key. Your father came to me months ago, right after his diagnosis. He knew exactly how things would play out. The drawer opened with a soft click. Inside was a thick manila envelope and a USB drive. Before you look at those, Imani said, sitting on the edge of the desk, there's something you need to know about tomorrow's will reading. Your father added a codicil 3 days before he died. A what? A modification to the will? And trust me, it's going to change everything. I spread the contents of the manila envelope across the desk. Photos, spilled out photos of Seraphina meeting with someone in a dark parking lot, Julian entering a lawyer's office that wasn't Imani's, bank statements, email printouts. Dad had them investigated? Better. Imani's smile was sharp. He had them followed. That USB drive contains video footage of Seraphina attempting to bribe your father's nurse for information about his will 2 days before he died. My hands shook as I picked up one of the photos. Is that Declan meeting with Seraphina 3 weeks before my father's death? Imani confirmed. But look at his face in the next photo. The second photo showed my brother leaving the meeting, his expression twisted with disgust. He was holding what looked like a check. He kept the check as evidence, Imani explained. Brought it straight to your father. That's when Arthur knew he had to act fast. But Seraphina said Declan was helping them. Your brother's been playing a dangerous game, Eleanor, feeding them just enough information to keep them confident, all while helping your father gather evidence of their conspiracy. I sank back into the chair, my mind spinning. Why didn't he tell me? Because Seraphina needed to show her hand first. Imani pulled out some papers from her briefcase. Tomorrow, when I read the will, Seraphina and Julian are going to think they've won. The initial reading will grant them a significant portion of the estate. What? I stood up so fast my wine glass tipped over, staining the carpet red. Let me finish. Imani held up her hand. That's when the codicil kicks in. Your father set up a trap, Eleanor. The moment they accept the inheritance, they trigger a clause that reveals their attempted manipulation and fraud. Everything, the photos, the videos, the bribes, becomes public record. I stared at the evidence spread across the desk, understanding dawning. He made them think they won, so they'd incriminate themselves. Exactly. Imani's grin was triumphant. The real will leaves everything to you, with a trust set up for Declan. Serafina and Julian get nothing except a very public exposure of their true characters. And tomorrow, Imani finished her wine. We watch them walk right into the trap they set for themselves. Your father's last lesson about consequences. Sigh, I picked up his letter again, running my fingers over his familiar handwriting. Even from beyond the grave, he was protecting me, teaching me, helping me fight back. One more thing, Imani said softly. Declan asked to see you tonight. He has something else you need to know before tomorrow. I looked out the study window at the setting sun, thinking of my brother, of Serafina's smug face in the garden, of all the pieces my father had carefully put in place. Tell him to come over, I said. It's time we had a family reunion. Declan arrived after dark, looking nothing like the confident brother who'd stood beside Julian at the funeral. His designer suit was wrinkled, his eyes shadowed with exhaustion. He hesitated at the study doorway, clutching a leather portfolio like a shield. You look terrible, I said, breaking the ice. Yeah, well, playing double agent isn't as fun as the movies make it seem. He attempted a smile that didn't reach his eyes. Can I come in? I gestured to the chair across from me. Imani had left an hour ago, but the evidence of our earlier discovery still littered Dad's desk. I see you found Dad's insurance policy, Declan said, nodding at the photos. Why didn't you tell me what you were doing? The question came out sharper than I intended. He slumped into the chair. Because I needed to make it right. After everything with Julian, the way I treated you during the divorce, I was an idiot, Maddie. You were my brother, I corrected. You were supposed to be on my side. I know. He opened the portfolio and pulled out a check. This is what Serafina offered me to testify that Dad wasn't of sound mind when he made his final will. $500,000 to betray my own sister. I stared at the check, then at my brother. But you didn't cash it. No, I took it straight to Dad. Sit. Declan's voice cracked. You should have seen his face, Maddie. Not angry, just disappointed. That's when he told me about his plan. The grandfather clock in the hall chimed 10 times, each dong echoing through the tense silence. There's more. Declan continued, pulling out a phone. I recorded everything, every meeting, every offer, every threat. Serafina's been planning this for months, even before Dad got sick. He pressed play. Serafina's voice filled the room. Once the old man kicks it, we'll contest the will with your testimony about his mental state and Julian's long relationship with him. We'll get everything. Eleanor won't know what hit her. My hands clenched into fists. When was this? 2 months ago. But wait, there's worse. He fast-forwarded the recording. Julian's voice now. We'll sell the house, liquidate the assets. Eleanor can go back to her little apartment and her pathetic gardening business. She never deserved any of this anyway. Turn it off, I whispered. Declan complied, then pulled out one final document. This is why I came tonight. Serafina didn't just want the money, Maddie. She wanted revenge on you. Revenge? For what? For making Julian feel guilty. For making him pay alimony. For... He paused. For making him look bad when you caught them together. The memory struck me like a physical blow, walking into my bedroom and finding them there, Serafina's smug smile as my entire world collapsed. She was his secretary for 3 years, Declan went on, his voice steady but tinged with anger. She orchestrated everything, worming her way into his life, into Dad's circle. This document shows she started embezzling from Dad's company 6 months before you caught them. I grabbed the paper from him, scanning the bank transfers and account numbers, my eyes burning with disbelief. Dad knew about this? Found out right before his diagnosis? He was building a case against her, Declan said, his voice trailing off. But then the cancer, that's when he started planning something else. He said sometimes justice needs a different path. The codicil, I murmured, understanding. Yeah, tomorrow's going to be brutal, Maddie. They think they have it all figured out. Serafina's even hired a camera crew to document the historic moment when they take possession of the estate. Despite everything, I couldn't help but laugh. She hired cameras to record her own downfall. Dad would have loved the irony. Declan smiled this time, a real smile. Listen, I know I can't undo the last 3 years with one night of revelations, but I want you to know I'm here now. Whatever happens tomorrow, I've got your back. I stood and walked to the window, gazing out at Dad's garden bathed in moonlight. Remember when we were kids and Dad caught us fighting over that red Corvette toy car? Declan came to stand beside me. He made us wash every window in the house, said we needed to learn to see things clearly. I turned to face him, feeling the weight of the moment. I see clearly now, Declan. I see what Dad was trying to teach us, even at the end. He nodded, his eyes full of understanding. That sometimes the biggest victory isn't in winning, it's in letting your enemies defeat themselves. I finished his thought. The grandfather clock in the hallway chimed, the sound slicing through the silence, reminding us that tomorrow was drawing closer. You should get some rest, Declan, I said, gathering the evidence in my hands. Tomorrow's going to be one hell of a show. I watched him leave, my fingers brushing the cool window pane, solid and steady beneath my touch. Dad had always said in these windows were the eyes of the house, watching over the family. Tomorrow, they would witness justice served exactly the way he had planned. The morning of the will reading arrived, clear and bright. I found myself in Dad's study once more, watching Imani arrange papers on the massive oak desk while the camera crew set up around the room. Serafina's camera crew is here, Declan announced as he slipped through the door. You should see her out there, practicing her gracious acceptance speech. Everything ready? I asked, turning to Imani. She patted her briefcase. All set. The codicil is sealed in this envelope, along with copies of all the evidence. Once they accept the initial terms... A noise in the hallway interrupted her. Serafina's voice, high-pitched and giddy, rang through the door. This is where we'll put the new chandelier. The old one is so outdated. Places, everyone, Imani muttered, straightening her suit jacket. Let the show begin. Serafina swept in first, wearing a black dress that probably cost more than most people's rent. Julian followed, looking out of place in his tailored suit. The camera crew trailed behind them, adjusting lights and checking angles. Eleanor. Julian's nod was stiff, the first time he'd addressed me directly since the divorce. Let's begin, Imani said, taking her place behind Dad's desk. As Arthur's attorney, I'll be reading his last will and testament, along with any additional documents he prepared before his passing. Serafina practically bounced in her seat. We're ready. The initial reading went exactly as Imani had warned me. Dad's estate, including the house and company shares, would be divided 60% to me, 40% to Julian and Serafina. I knew it! Serafina squealed, grabbing Julian's arm. Arthur loved us too much to leave us out. However, Imani continued, her voice cutting through Serafina's excitement, there is a codicil to the will added just 3 days before Arthur's death. Serafina's smile faltered. A what? A modification? Julian's voice trembled as he spoke. What kind of modification? Imani broke the seal on the envelope. The acceptance of any inheritance under this will is contingent upon a full investigation into certain financial irregularities discovered in the months preceding Arthur's death. The room went silent. Even the cameras seemed to hold their breath. What irregularities? Serafina's voice had lost its triumphant edge. Perhaps these will explain, Imani said, sliding the photos across the desk. Or this USB drive containing footage of attempted bribery. Or these bank statements showing systematic embezzlement from Harrison Industries. Julian grabbed one of the photos, his face draining of color. Where did you get these? Dad had quite the collection of evidence, Declan spoke up from his corner, including recordings of you both planning to contest the will based on false testimony about his mental state. Serafina stood up so fast her chair toppled backward. Turn those cameras off now! Oh, no, I said, standing to face her. The cameras stay. You wanted to document this historic moment, remember? You can't do this, she hissed. Julian, tell them they can't do this. But Julian was still staring at the photos, particularly one showing him entering a competitor's office with confidential company documents. The codicil is quite clear, Imani continued, professional as ever. Any attempt to claim inheritance automatically triggers the release of all this evidence to the proper authorities. The choice is yours. Choice? Serafina laughed hysterically. What choice? You've trapped us. No, I corrected her. You trapped yourselves. Every scheme, every plot, every attempt to steal what wasn't yours, it all led to this moment. This is your fault. She whirled on Declan. You were supposed to help us! Declan shrugged. I did help, just not you. Julian, she pleaded, do something! But Julian was already standing, straightening his tie with shaking hands. It's over, Serafina. We've lost. The hell it is. I won't let that buck win. That buckin is my daughter. Dad's voice filled the room. Everyone froze as Imani pressed play on a video file. Dad's face appeared on one of the camera crew's monitors, thin but determined, recorded just days before his death. And if you're watching this, it means you've shown your true colors, just as I knew you would. Greed is a terrible teacher, but consequences are excellent students. Serafina's mascara ran in black streaks as she backed toward the door. This isn't over. Actually, Imani said, it is. The police are waiting in the foyer to discuss the evidence of embezzlement. I'd suggest cooperating. It might help with sentencing. As Serafina and Julian were led away, the cameras still rolling, I felt Dad's presence in every corner of the room. He'd orchestrated it all, not just to protect his legacy, but to teach one final lesson about justice and patience. Well, Declan said into the silence, I guess those cameras caught their historic moment after all. The media circus that followed was exactly what Serafina had wanted, just not in the way she'd planned. By evening, local news vans lined the street, and my phone wouldn't stop buzzing with calls from reporters. You need to see this, Declan said, turning up the volume on Dad's old television in the study. Serafina's arrest was playing on every channel, her mascara-streaked face a stark contrast to her designer dress. As officers led her to a police car, the reporter's voice droned. The investigation into Harrison Industries has uncovered multiple instances of fraud. Turn it off, I said, rubbing my temples. I can't watch anymore. Imani burst through the door, waving her phone. It gets better. The DA just called. They found offshore accounts, dummy corporations, everything. Serafina wasn't just stealing from your father's company. She was running a whole network of fraud schemes. And Julian? I asked, not sure why I still cared about my ex-husband's fate. Singing like a canary, Declan replied. Turns out he's not so loyal when facing serious prison time. A sharp knock at the study door made us all jump. A police detective entered, looking apologetic. Miss Harrison, we need to discuss some additional evidence we've uncovered. More? I gestured for him to sit. What now? We found documents in Miss West's apartment suggesting this wasn't her first attempt at this type of scheme. There are at least 3 other cases of her targeting wealthy families, though she never succeeded on this scale before. Imani leaned forward. Other families? Yes. She would typically work her way into their lives through employment or social connections, then orchestrate situations to gain access to their assets. The detective pulled out a folder. Sound familiar? The secretary position, I whispered. It wasn't random. No, it wasn't. She specifically targeted your ex-husband because of his connection to your father's company. The affair was just her way in. My stomach churned. 3 years of blame and self-doubt about my failed marriage suddenly shifted perspective. There's something else, the detective continued. We found this in her personal files. It appears to be a detailed plan for after she gained control of the estate. He handed me a document that made my blood run cold, detailed notes about accidents that could befall me after the transfer of property, plans to frame Declan for financial misconduct, even sketches of how she wanted to remodel the house, starting with destroying Dad's garden. She would have killed me, I said flatly. She never would have gotten the chance, Declan growled, gripping the arm of his chair. The detective nodded grimly. This evidence upgrades the charges significantly. Combined with the fraud charges and attempted bribery, she's looking at 15 to 20 years minimum. After he left, we sat in stunned silence until Imani's phone buzzed again. It's my contact at the DA's office, she said, reading the message. Julian just finished his statement. He's admitted to everything, including helping Serafina access confidential company files before Dad's death. But did he know? I had to ask. About her plans for me? No, Declan answered, scanning the documents. According to this, she kept that part to herself. Probably knew he wouldn't have the stomach for it. A thought struck me. Dad knew, didn't he? That's why he put all this in motion. Imani nodded slowly. He suspected. That's why he hired the private investigators, why he documented everything. He wasn't just protecting his legacy, he was protecting you. I walked to the window, looking out at the garden now swarming with news crews. The roses still bloomed, oblivious to the chaos their previous admirer had planned. We should release a statement, Declan suggested. Control the narrative before Serafina's lawyers try to spin this. Already drafted, Imani pulled out her laptop. A simple statement about cooperating with authorities and requesting privacy during this difficult time. Professional, dignified, everything Serafina wasn't. Dad would like that, I said, managing a small smile. There's one more thing, Declan said, pulling an envelope from his jacket. I found this in Dad's personal safe. It's marked, "After justice is served." My hands trembled as I carefully opened the letter, recognizing Dad's handwriting once again. My dear Maddie, if you're reading this, then the truth has finally come to light. Don't let this experience harden your heart. The garden still needs tending and life still needs living. I didn't set this trap just for justice. I did it so you could be free from doubt, free from fear, and free to bloom again. Love always, Dad. Outside, the reporters kept broadcasting the scandal to the world, the arrests, the betrayals, the lies. But inside the study, surrounded by the evidence of my father's love and foresight, I felt something I hadn't felt since I caught Julian with Serafina years ago. Peace. So? Declan's voice broke the silence. What now? I glanced at the roses outside the window, then turned to my brother and best friend. Now we rebuild together. The preliminary hearing came faster than I had anticipated. 1 month after the will reading, I found myself sitting in a courtroom, watching Serafina and Julian being led both in orange jumpsuits, a stark contrast to their usual designer attire. All rise, the bailiff called. Imani squeezed my hand as we stood. She'd insisted on being both my lawyer and my moral support, saying that some moments required both legal expertise and friendship. You don't have to speak today, she whispered. The evidence speaks for itself. But I knew I had to. Dad's last letter had urged me not to let this harden my heart, and staying silent felt too much like giving in to fear. Serafina's eyes locked with mine as she passed our bench. The hatred in them was unmistakable, but there was something else too, something more vulnerable, more desperate. Her lawyer had been trying to negotiate a plea deal, but the DA wasn't budging, not with the mountain of evidence stacked against her. Your Honor, the prosecutor began, the state would like to enter into evidence exhibits A through F, documenting a pattern of systematic fraud and conspiracy spanning 3 years. I watched as the photos, bank statements, and recordings were displayed. With each new piece of evidence, Serafina's face grew paler, her arrogance cracking. Julian, on the other hand, sat slumped in his chair, staring at his hands in quiet defeat. The state calls Eleanor Harrison to the stand. Walking to the witness box felt like crossing an ocean. I could feel the weight of every eye in the room, the journalists scribbling frantically in their notebooks, the jury leaning forward in anticipation, and Serafina's glare burning a hole in my back. Please state your name for the record. Eleanor Harrison. Can you tell us about your relationship with the defendants? I took a deep breath, locking eyes with Serafina. Julian was my husband for 15 years. Serafina was his secretary and the woman he had an affair with. And after your divorce, they married 6 months later. They began visiting my father, building a relationship with him while he was sick. Objection! Serafina's lawyer shot to his feet. Relevance? Goes to motive, Your Honor, the prosecutor countered. Shows the systematic nature of their plan. Overruled. Continue. I recounted everything: the visits, the manipulation, the threats Serafina had made in the garden, and the evidence Dad had carefully collected. With each word, I could see Serafina's carefully crafted facade crumble bit by bit. Miss Harrison, the prosecutor held up documents found in Serafina's apartment. When did you become aware of these plans regarding your safety? Objection! Serafina's lawyer practically shouted. Those documents are circumstantial, Your Honor. These documents detail specific plans to harm the witness after gaining control of the estate. The judge glanced at Serafina over his glasses. Overruled. I learned about them after their arrest, I answered, my voice steady. My father suspected something like this might happen. That's why he gathered all the evidence. That's why he changed his will. He was protecting me even after he was gone. Serafina suddenly stood up, her handcuffs rattling. He was a manipulative old man who couldn't stand to see his precious daughter lose anything. This whole thing is a setup. Miss West, sit down, the judge ordered. You think you've won? Serafina shouted at me. You think this is over? I made your husband leave you once, I destroyed your marriage, and I'll find a way to destroy everything else too. The courtroom erupted in chaos. Bailiffs rushed to restrain Serafina as she continued screaming threats. Julian looked like he wanted to sink into the floor. Order! The judge's gavel cracked like thunder. Remove the defendant! As they dragged Serafina away, still shouting, I caught Declan's eye in the gallery. He gave me a subtle nod. Everything she just said had been caught on the court record, destroying any chance of sympathy from the jury. The judge called a recess, and Imani hurried me out of the courtroom. In the hallway, reporters clamored for comments, but she expertly steered me past them. Well, she said once we were safely in a private room, I'd say that outburst just sealed their fate. Did you see Julian's face? Declan joined us, closing the door on the media circus outside. He finally saw her for what she really is. I sank into a chair, exhaustion hitting me all at once. Dad knew. He knew exactly how she would react when cornered, because people like that can't stand losing control. Imani said, pulling out her phone. The DA is texting me already. They want to move forward with additional charges based on her threats in court. So, how much time is she looking at now? 25 to 30 years minimum. Julian might get less with his cooperation, but he's still looking at 10 to 15. I thought about Dad's roses, still blooming in the garden he'd loved. He always said the truth finds its way to the light eventually. Speaking of truth, Declan said, there's something else you need to know about Dad's evidence, something we found in his personal safe this morning. Back in Dad's study, Declan pulled out a weathered leather journal. The police found this when they were doing their final sweep of Serafina's apartment. It was hidden in a false bottom of her desk drawer. What is it? I reached for the journal, but Declan held it back. Before you read this, you need to understand Dad knew about this journal. It's why he was so certain about Serafina's intentions. Imani leaned forward. Is this what I think it is? Her playbook? Declan confirmed. Detailed accounts of every family she's targeted, every scheme she's run, including her original plans for us. He opened the journal to a marked page and began reading. The Harrison family presents the perfect opportunity, wealthy patriarch, strained family relationships, naive daughter who trusts too easily. The husband is the weak link, easily manipulated with flattery and attention. My stomach churned. Stop. You need to hear this, Maddie. Declan continued reading. Phase 1, complete marriage destroyed. Phase 2, isolate the daughter from her support system. Phase 3, gain the father's trust. Final phase, eliminate all obstacles permanently. That's when Dad confronted her, isn't it? I asked, remembering Dad's sudden insistence on updating his will. Imani nodded. He showed me this journal 3 months ago. That's when we started building the case against her. But there's more, Declan said, flipping to another section. She wasn't working alone. There's a whole network of people involved in these schemes, names, dates, bank accounts, everything. A sharp knock interrupted us. The detective from earlier entered, looking grimmer than before. We've been going through Miss West's contacts, he announced. Found something interesting about her past. She's not who she claims to be. He laid out a series of documents on Dad's desk: birth certificates, passports, driver's licenses, all with different names but the same face. Her real name is Isabel Phillips. She's wanted in 3 states for similar schemes. The FBI has been looking for her for years. Isabel Phillips. The name hit me like a physical blow. The woman who was convicted of killing that businessman in Florida? His death was ruled an accident, the detective corrected. But yes, same person. She served 5 years for fraud, got out, changed her identity, and started over. Your father was her biggest target yet. Amani was already on her phone. I'm calling the DA. This changes everything. With these priors, she's looking at life in prison. There's something else, the detective added. We found this in her safety deposit box. He handed me a USB drive. It's footage of your father confronting her about the journal. Thought you might want to see it. With shaking hands, I plugged the drive into Dad's computer. His face filled the screen, sitting in this very study looking directly at Serafina. I know what you're planning. Dad's voice was steel. I've read your little journal. Quite the career you've had, Isabel. Serafina's face on the screen went white. How did you really think I wouldn't investigate the woman trying to destroy my family? I've known who you are since the day you started working for my company. Then why? Why did you let me continue? Because sometimes the best way to catch a snake is to let it think it's winning. Dad leaned forward. You're finished, Isabel. Everything you've done, everyone you've hurt, it ends here. You're dying, Serafina spat. You can't stop me. Dad's laugh was cold. My dear, I already have. You just don't know it yet. The video ended, leaving us in stunned silence. He knew, I whispered. He knew everything right from the start, and he built an airtight case. Amani added, one that would protect you and expose her entire network. The detective gathered his documents. The FBI wants to talk to you tomorrow. With this journal and your father's evidence, we can take down her whole organization. After he left, I walked to Dad's chair, running my hand along the worn leather. He let her think she was winning all while making sure she'd never hurt anyone again. Classic Dad. Declan smiled. Always playing the long game. Amani's phone buzzed. The DA just approved the new charges. They're upgrading it to a federal case. Serafina, or Isabel, will never see the outside of a prison again. I picked up Dad's journal from his desk, the one he'd kept all his life, and opened it to his last entry. Sometimes justice takes patience. Sometimes it takes sacrifice. But most importantly, it takes faith in the truth. Maddie will understand when the time comes. The garden will bloom again, stronger than before. The preliminary hearing resumes tomorrow, Amani said softly. Are you ready to finish this? I looked at the evidence spread across the desk, at Dad's journal, at the garden, beyond the window, where all this began. Yes, I said. It's time to end this. For Dad, for everyone she's ever hurt. And for you, Declan added, mostly for you. The gavel's final crack echoed through the courtroom like thunder. In light of the overwhelming evidence and the additional federal charges, this court sentences Isabel Phillips, also known as Serafina West, to life imprisonment, without the possibility of parole. Serafina Isabel stood rigid in her orange jumpsuit, all traces of her former polished facade gone. When they led her past our bench, she stopped turning to face me one last time. I hope you're happy, she hissed. You've ruined everything. No, I replied calmly. You did that yourself. The only difference is that this time your target fought back. The bailiff pulled her away before she could respond. Behind her, Julian was already being led out, beginning his own 15-year sentence. Outside the courthouse, reporters surged toward us, but Amani's commanding voice cut through the chaos. My client has no comment, except to say that justice has been served not just for her family, but for all the families affected by these crimes. But back at the house, Declan was waiting, holding a surprise. The FBI finished processing Dad's study. They found this hidden in his desk. He handed me a small box. Inside was a single key and a note. For when justice blooms, check the greenhouse. The greenhouse had always been Dad's private retreat, a place he escaped to when he needed peace to think. I hadn't stepped foot inside since his death. Want us to come with you? Amani asked. I shook my head. I need to do this alone. The key turned smoothly in the lock. As the door creaked open, warm air wrapped around me, thick with the scent of blooming flowers. Dad's prized orchids were still thriving, a clear sign that someone, probably Declan, had been taking care of them during the past few months. In the center of the greenhouse stood Dad's old workbench, and on it lay a large envelope with my name on it. I opened it and found a deed and another letter. "My dearest Maddie," the letter began. "By now, justice has been served and the truth has come to light, but justice wasn't the only thing I wanted to cultivate in this greenhouse. I grew more than flowers, I grew hope. Hope that you'd find your strength again, that you'd bloom despite the shadows others cast. The deed in this envelope is for the vacant lot next to your old flower shop. I bought it the day after I confronted Isabel. It's time for Harrison Gardens to grow beyond our home. Your gift for bringing beauty into the world shouldn't be confined to one garden. Remember what I taught you. Some flowers bloom best after a frost. You've weathered your winter, Maddie. Now it's time to bloom again. Love always, Dad." I walked back to the house, holding the deed and letter, feeling dazed. Declan and Amani were waiting in the kitchen. "Well?" Declan asked. I spread the deed across the counter. "He bought me the lot next to my old shop. He wanted me to expand the business." Amani's eyes gleamed as she pulled out her tablet. "That's not all. The Harrison Gardens trademark was registered 6 months ago. He set up everything: business plans, permits, funding. All it needs is you." "And us," Declan added. "I've picked up a thing or two about gardening these past few months. Someone had to keep his orchids alive." A knock at the door interrupted us. The detective entered, smiling. "Just wanted to let you know, 3 more victims of Isabel's schemes have come forward with their testimony and your father's evidence. We're looking at closing over a dozen cold cases." "Dad would have liked that," I said. "He always believed that every truth finds its light eventually." "Speaking of truth," Declan said after the detective left, "I found something else while tending the greenhouse." He pulled out his phone and showed me a photo of a small plaque hidden among the orchids. The inscription read, "For Maddie, who taught me that the strongest flowers grow in broken places." He'd placed it there right after my divorce, I realized. Even then, he knew I'd find my way back. "So," Amani said, her legal pad already in hand, a familiar glint in her eye, "should I start drawing up the business papers for Harrison Gardens?" I looked out at Dad's garden, where the roses were still blooming, despite everything that had happened. Beyond them, I saw the future he'd envisioned for me: not just justice, but growth. Not just survival, but flourishing. "Yes," I said, feeling a strength I hadn't known in years. "It's time to grow something new." "To Dad," Declan said, raising his coffee mug. "To justice," Imani added, raising hers. I picked up my own mug, thinking of orchids and roses, of truth and time, of endings and new beginnings, of blooming again. Through the window, the garden glowed in the afternoon sun, each flower a testament to Dad's belief that beauty can thrive even in the hardest soil. He had given me more than justice, he had given me back my future, one bloom at a time. What does it mean to truly inherit something? Is it just about money, assets, or does it hold deeper significance? For Eleanor, the inheritance from her late father was about so much more than wealth. It was the key to her future, her strength, and her personal growth. After Serafina and Julian's humiliating defeat, Eleanor stood at a crossroads. The will had been read, justice had been served, and the truth was finally out. But the real question was, what would she do with this newfound power? As she walked through the house that had been her father's legacy, she couldn't help but feel the weight of the decisions ahead. Her father had always taught her to build, to grow, and to stand firm, even in the harshest conditions, and now, in the greenhouse he had once tended, she found his final lesson waiting for her. It wasn't just about protecting the family estate. It was about forging something new, something that was hers, something that could bloom in the very place where she had once been broken. Her father had bought the lot next to her flower shop, setting up everything she needed to expand her business, including permits, funding, and plans. But beyond that, he had planted seeds of hope in her heart. Hope that she could thrive even after all she had been through. The future was wide open, ready for her to shape it. The decision was hers. Would she take this opportunity to grow, to embrace her legacy and the business her father had envisioned for her? Or would she let the past dictate her future? Eleanor stood in the kitchen, looking at the deed her father had left her. It was clear that he believed in her, even when she didn't believe in herself. This was the beginning of a new chapter. But as Eleanor prepared to rebuild Harrison Gardens, she couldn't help but wonder, what would it take to leave the past behind and truly embrace the future? What about you? Do you think it's ever too late to start over, to rebuild what was lost? Share your thoughts in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe for more stories of resilience, growth, and new beginnings.